Hello and welcome to today's webinar, GIS and Disaster Management, a key tool for effective disaster assessment. I am Mike Cox. I'm the Director of Fire Rescue and EMS for Esri, and I'll be kicking off the event today that is full of star-studded presenters from a number of technology providers and agencies that will give you an overview of how you can improve your disaster response and damage assessment operations during type 1 incidents or significant disasters. So just a few housekeeping items before we really dig in here. There is a poll we're going to provide because we'd like to learn, who we're dealing with today, and if you can provide information on, your background and how you're engaging technology, that will help us not only in this webinar but in future webinars. So we appreciate your response to the poll there. Also, there's a question and answer function in the webinar application, so please use that to ask questions. And we will have a Q&A session at the end of the webinar to try to address any questions you come up with. A recording of this webinar will be provided after today's session, so be on the lookout for that. And we will move through the agenda, moving from speaker to speaker, and they'll be able to introduce themselves. I am lucky enough to be joined today by Jeremiah Lindeman from our Esri product management team, and he'll give an overview of some very specific functions of damage assessment capabilities you have through your GIS. But let's start with really what is Esri, or who is Esri, right? So a 50-year-old company providing geospatial software. Really any map you see in local, state, or federal agencies domestically in the United States, and certainly with disaster response internationally, is likely an Esri product. Many of you may have seen things like the COVID dashboard from Johns Hopkins University. That's the technology we're discussing. So again, 100 offices around the world, and certainly allows you to use or leverage GIS as a system of record for your response agencies. I actually refer to it often as another way to communicate during incident response, because it doesn't matter what radio system you're using. It doesn't matter what kind of computer. Essentially, if I can get a link to another person, then they can have the same access to the same visual product that we're using, whether that's a map or a dashboard view, or any kind of analytics around understanding the impact these events may have in our community. So it really provides, integration of disparate data sources into a visual product that helps you understand the issue, drives the decision making with good verified incident intelligence, and allows you to share that story with other participating agencies and stakeholders that have responsibility for the response to whatever that disaster may be. So again, you see GIS being leveraged to address organizational issues, trying to build efficiencies in the response where we can reduce cost, where we can reduce impact, we can understand the specific impacts in our communities and deploy resources in a more efficient manner, so we're not wasting time sending personnel where they don't need to go due to lower levels of damage or no impact at all. So we can actually deploy resources in a more efficient and safer manner, because we can more easily identify the risks, not only to the occupants or the taxpayer, right, but also to the responder. And we also help or use GIS to help with technical challenges around a response or dealing with significant incidents. And that can include moving paper-driven workflows to digital workflows. So we'll see a great example of that today related to the damage assessment application we're going to discuss. But again, the ability to have other agencies sharing their data seamlessly and be able to not have to do paper-driven workflows across agency lines or across jurisdictional boundaries. So it really is a way to provide that seamless sharing of data and information, a great source for public information operations for the general public, certainly other government agencies, and then submitting data and information after the event for recovery issues. GIS can help with that, and again, serve as that system of record to provide that kind of data. So the technology can impact you across the response continuum, from preparedness and mitigation to the actual response and the recovery. And again, we have a number of solutions that we're going to discuss today. But for this, or for the current damage assessment focus, I'm going to now turn it over to Jeremiah so he can give you some information on damage assessment. Jeremiah?
Great. Thank you, Mike. Let me share my screen here real quick. Okay, you just give a quick thumbs up that you can see that okay.
Looks good.
Great. Yeah, so thanks, Mike. My name is Jeremiah, and I'm going to talk about the damage assessment solution that we provide that helps you quickly assess the impact of a disaster and be able to use that information to really speed up the recovery process. So I'm on what's called our solutions team. And so Mike talked a bit about ArcGIS. And with ArcGIS, you get a series of solutions that align with your business needs and help you transform your use of GIS and maximize the investment you're already making in the technology. These industry-specific configurations help you improve the operations and enhance the services you already provide. They're also fully supported by our tech support, just like any other product. So you may have heard some of my colleagues talk about some of these solutions if you've attended some of these previous webinars around asset mapping. I'm on the public safety team where we help with emergency management solutions. I'm going to talk about damage assessment, but we have other solutions that are geared to other workflows within the emergency management realm as well, if you're interested. Okay, but for today's purpose, we're going to focus on damage assessment. It's really about streamlining the damage assessments. What we are doing is aligning ourselves to the FEMA process. So if a declaration would have to be declared, making sure that we're giving all the information that would be needed to be delivered in order to satisfy that declaration. But also other tools to inform and engage the public, and then improve collaboration with federal and state agencies. As we know, the disasters don't stop at boundaries, such as county boundaries, so you may have to talk to your neighbors and share data, but also up to state and federal agencies such as FEMA. Okay, really last slide here. I'm going to go through a series of demonstrations, but the main thing I would like you to kind of keep in mind as I'm going through the demonstrations is each application or information product I show is intended for maybe a different person. So we're going to start with residents on the left. So how can you engage with your citizens to help share information in a transparent way, but also let them be a sensor and report damage. They can be a great first sensor as to what's happening out in the midst of a disaster. Moving along, first responders. You might want to do a very quick report about what's happening. These are sometimes called windshield reports, where you're not doing really a full assessment, but you might be having a team of two, someone's driving and someone's going off and just simply taking pictures to get that first pass. So we can collect information from these first responders and from residents, and someone that will act as a damage assessment coordinator is going to take all that information and really manage it. They may assess and see that that information needs to have a full assessment done by boots on the ground. And that's where our field inspectors will come through. And we have different surveys that will allow you to do a full assessment of the damage. And this is really where we align with that FEMA process. We have individual assistance surveys. That is really going off and doing an assessment of residential damage. And then public assistance is for publicly owned properties such as schools or bridges. And then we also provide some other reports and so forth with the solution. So with that being said, let's just go ahead and dive right in and look at some this stuff in action and see how it all comes together. The thing again, before I really get started, I want to point out that we align with the FEMA process called preliminary damage assessments. They offer digital damage surveys that you can use. They use our technology. What we do is we basically bundle up what they're offering in an easy way so you can start to enable your field inspectors to go off and do their job really quickly. If you have ArcGIS, you are used to using something like this, ArcGIS Online. If you have not seen solutions, I can go to the app switcher, go to solutions. This is where we will see all the solutions available. So again, you may have seen some of my colleagues present on some of these. I just want to highlight emergency management. We have several workflows in here that may be of interest, but for today's purpose, I'm going to focus in on damage assessment, where I can watch a video, scroll through, see a little bit about what is provided in the solution, as well as links to documentation. But if I click this deploy now, I'm going to have access to everything I'm about to show you. So I'm going to start off with the very first piece. I'm going to work on the left on that slide I showed earlier, where I'm going to assume the role of a resident or that wants to find information out about what's happening in the community. So I can scroll down and I can see that we're providing information about this number of assessments that we completed, how many properties are destroyed, and so forth. We're using all of our out-of-the-box technology here. So everything is configurable and extensible. It's pretty easy to come in and here and brand or make changes to this website that you would deliver to your citizens. Citizens can also understand the current conditions. So if I open this up, what I will see is a photo viewer where your residents can start to see what is the damage. So I can go in and I can start to click on different properties and start to see what is the level of assessment. We're not sharing all the information, but just enough to give a quick glimpse as to what has been done as far as the assessment goes. You can think of about in the time of a disaster, if someone has been evacuated, that's a lot of stress. They might be in a shelter and they don't really know what their next steps are. But if they start to see what is actually happening, because they can't get into this area since it's probably closed off, it kind of helps them determine next steps. We've also heard benefits to using this approach by just cutting down media requests and helping showcase what is happening by being transparent. Now, residents can also report their own damage, and this is a trend that we've been seeing quite a bit. As we can see in this picture, we might be dealing with something like a flood, where you, as perhaps a county emergency management agency, cannot get in there to do an assessment. So you're blocked out and almost the inverse. So residents can come in and they can start to fill out a public damage report. And they'll just fill out some really general contact information. And really then the next page gets into some more of the specifics. If there's a flood, what's the estimated water depth? So there'll be some dependent questions and then what type of damage there is. And then they can upload their photos and submit that. So that's one way where you can start collecting information. Another reason why this has really been beneficial is a lot of counties, especially larger geographic-wise counties, you might have a disaster that hits a more of a rural part of the county and it just takes you a while to get there, and your citizens can really kind of help speed up that process to give you insight about how bad the damage is. So that's a way that you can engage with your citizens. I'm going to kind of switch hats now and talk about how we can engage with some of the first responders. So we have a page that you can share with people if they're more part of this internal workflow. So this wouldn't be shared by the public, but this internal destination can be used by internal stakeholders. I can scroll down here and I can see what else is available. One of the processes is the windshield damage reports. Again, this is where that team of two would come into play. What they can do is they can install the ArcGIS Quick Capture app from Google Play or iPhone App Store. And what they'll get is an app that looks like this that they would run on their device, probably their phone or their GPS. So again, someone's driving and someone's in the passenger seat, and all they're going to do is basically come through and just basically do that first assessment. They'll snag a picture real quick. I can take a picture myself. We can add multiple photos, and we can say some real quick comments. If I'm using my phone, I can use the voice to text, so I can put in some real quick information. I can change the location in the map if I have not got out of my car, but I want to specify more detail where that is. So a real quick way to just enable you to start doing some of those quick windshield damage reports. Okay, so I've collected two types of information. I've got the public reports, or I've got these windshield damage reports. And that's really where we get more into the internal workflow of the damage assessment coordinator. So the coordinator will use this application where they can start to manage the overall process. So one of the tools I can see is I can look at all of the assessments that have been coming in. What we've done is we've symbolized or color coded them by different categories and where they are at within the process. So if it's a windshield report or if it's a come in from the public, it's really determined to be, it's just submitted. We haven't really done the full assessment with it yet. So I can take any one of these properties where I know I've got some information, and I can start to look at it in more detail, what has been come in. And I can just say, I want to take this from submitted, and I'm going to assign it to someone on the team that wants to go off and do more work. And I can provide more comments that goes along with that. So that's a pretty quick way where I can start to change the status of any given report that has come in. So now that is assigned to me, that's where we'll use the FEMA process for the forms that they provide. So if again, I'm going to hop over to another application. In this case, I'm going to use something called Survey 123. And again, I would just minimize this for now. Survey 123, again, is another app you can download from one of the stores where you can start to do that full assessment process. Now, I just assigned one of those public reports to myself, so that will come through in my inbox, and I can see it will be in my list, and it will help navigate where I need to go to fill out everything that is provided. If things have been filled in about what type of damage it is and the general address, that's going to come in my inbox. I don't have to fill that in, and I'm basically just validating information. Now, like any solution, you can also just use different pieces of it. Maybe you're not using the public reporting or even the windshield reports, and you know the damage is bad enough, you can send your folks off just to start collecting right away. So in that case, you're going to have basically a blank survey where you'll scroll down and you can fill out all the information that goes along with this. So this is almost verbatim the form that FEMA provides and all the information that they are expecting to be submitted. And there's some dependent questions about if I select certain information, additional questions will appear. But what type of residency is it? Do you know if there's insurance that's been collected? How bad is the assessment? And then lastly, as we can see the power of the photos that will go along with the assessment. So I fill out all the information and I just click submit, and that will be submitted as part of that assessment process. So, think of, the theme of asset mapping. We're keeping track of assets that are, properties, but really mapping the damage associated with those various properties. And then lastly, just kind of monitor all this information as it comes along. I can monitor both individual assistance and public assistance. The form that I was just looking at was for individual assistance, so that's for my residential properties. I get a nice dashboard to visualize to see how bad is the damage and various filters on the left here, so I can start to see where are we at within the assessment process, what types of dwelling maybe I want to focus in on, is there insurance, and so forth. So a quick way to kind of monitor the overall progress. And again, that's for individual assistance. Just for time's sake, gonna skip over the form for public assistance, but I can do the same thing to start to manage the progress of my publicly owned damage. Lastly, just so I want to end with is some tools for administering this. So we talked about the importance of collaborating with others. So we have some tools to help enable you to take all of the results and share them with other government agencies that may need access to this, granting access to the right people so they can go off and do the job. Some reporting that goes along with the dashboards that I just saw. So for instance, what I can do is I can generate a report that might look like this. FEMA has something called a street sheet that will basically take all those properties and break them down based upon categories. So where did the damage occur? Which county? Is it owner or renter occupied, and what type of dwelling it is? And you can get more of a comprehensive report that can be shared. Okay, so that was a pretty quick overview of the damage assessment solution. Again, really helps you streamline the overall damage assessment process, collaborate with partners, and share it with other agencies. So damage assessment, collecting that information, as you know, is probably just one small piece in the overall processes and workflows that are associated with the disasters. So we're going to turn it over now to some of our great partners that help address some of the other spaces within that workflow. So I'm gonna turn it over to Brant now, who's from CompassCon, to talk a little bit about their work.
Jeremiah, thank you very much. It's very interesting, and especially a way to automate and enhance the ability to document what needs to happen, especially in the recovery mode. So our focus here at CompassCom is we are a real-time mobile asset tracking solution. Let me get my slides deck up here. We're celebrating our 30th year in the business, and in doing so, we have been an Esri partner for 30 years, one of the select few that have been around for many years. Our focus in this space has always been to provide real-time situational awareness in a GIS-centric environment. If you look at some of our clients we deal with in the U.S. Capitol Police, dealing with unique situations in D.C., search and rescue with sheriffs, and also with fire departments, wildland fire. We do all the tracking for Illinois DOT, the 8th largest communication network or transportation network in the country, which provides some really interesting disaster management challenges in that they have flooding on the Mississippi River. They have 11 nuclear facilities in the state that they have to plan for, and also being able to provide modal transport around airports and also many interstates from a very populous area of northern Illinois all the way down to rural Illinois. So a very it's been a 10-year client of ours, and it gives you a lot of perspective on how do you plan for what could happen in this space. We do work with the security side of the Air Force and the Army for base security and both internationally and locally. We do a lot of work with state and local snowplows, and blizzards are disasters. I mean, you recall the recent blizzard we had a couple of years ago up in Bismarck, North Dakota, in the end of March, I believe, or April, where it snowed 2 feet. A lot of different things to deal with there. We do this through our network of partners with, of course, Esri for 30 years, Motorola for 11 years. Most recently, BK Technologies is a radio company we work with as well. So when we look at the 5 stages of disasters, and Mike and Jeremiah have gone through this, so I want to focus on when it comes to location and working with people in the field, how does this all relate? Well, the emergency management professionals do a lot of the pre-planning, setting up of all the systems on the back end that once something happens, it can be dealt with. Many of the things you saw today with the Esri software. But when it comes to preparedness, response, and recovery, in the preparedness side, there are training exercises that go on consistently to make sure that we're ready when things happen. Then when something does happen, then there's a response and recovery. And the ability to communicate with the first responders and other commanders and other people in the chain is key. And I want to focus on that today. And when we look at what fails during a disaster, typically the power goes out, landline communication fails, wireless communication, typically broadband wireless, the commercial wireless will fail. The P25 networks, radio are more resilient. Water sanitation, fuel delivery, food supply. These are the areas that get impacted in many of the disasters. And when it comes to communication, what we're primarily looking at for our system is voice and data communications are what's important. And when you have broadband, talking about your standard cellular services provided by Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, or whoever, those systems can be affected by these events and typically are affected more than the land mobile radio systems, the P25 public safety grade radio systems. Then they bring in local networks to supplement the systems that are down. many times, and Chief Isaacs is going to follow me, can talk about what happens when those come in. And we're getting more and more options for satellite with Starlink, and there's going to be a lot more options with satellite coming soon with the small sat business. Chief Isaac will also talk about redundancy and making sure you have redundancy in the system, because not everything all works all the time, all at once. But one thing I would like to talk about, especially in preparedness when you're doing your training exercises, you should plan for the fact that you're not going to have many of these services. Just don't assume you're going to have voice communication. Don't assume you're going to have data communications. And what are the strategies around dealing with when you don't have that, and how you will work through it? The ability to see real time when to respond or to an event, a 911 call event. Many, most all in Florida and in the hurricane recovery sites, when the sustained winds are above 40 miles per hour, they don't even go out. So they're recording incidents, they're recording calls, they're getting ready. So when the winds do come down, they can go out. And you want to be able to make sure that you have the systems, and then when you're able to go out, to dispatch the right resource to the right place at the right time. So our system is about total insight and total control of connected workforce. We do this from fleets, for, as I said, from snow to public works to defense to first responders. But it's about being able to take multiple different kinds of assets, whether they're vehicle boxes in the car, a handheld radio, a smartphone, bring them through multiple communication networks, be it a Motorola P25 network, a Codan conventional system out west that are used primarily by the firefighting services, or standard broadband radio systems come into our system. We store the data and serve it out in an Esri-based environment. And that environment is our Compass Track viewer, but we also offer connectors that can go to things like GeoEvent or Velocity, or interface with as many of the things Jeremiah talked about. We also are doing more on the security side with TAC. And if you have more interest in TAC, please contact us. We can tell you about it. But it's the ability to take a broadband smartphone, bring that information in with a Motorola or BK radio system, and put it all in one Esri common operational picture, which has been very helpful in events, especially events. And they're struggling a bit to get it up and running, happen in Butler, PA, but that is the future of where a lot of these event-based things are happening. We interface just not with one different type of comm and or manufacturer, from Motorola to BK, Motorola Turbo, Cradlepoint, Sierra Wireless, all simultaneously to bring into a common operational picture. We can bring land mobile radio, broadband, and satellite communications in, which is very important in disaster management, because if any of those fails, you do have some redundancy. It's all developed on an Esri-based mapping platform, and we access Esri ArcGIS online when we have internet connectivity, or many of our clients that are on-prem provide their own data that's on-prem and available no matter what happens on the outside world. We do real-time alerting, whether it's emergency alert on pushing a button on a radio or on a cell phone, geofencing, being able to geofence areas that have been searched in after an incident to make sure we've covered them, and do search and rescue. Also, we've had people use ours in line with what Jeremiah was talking about, doing geofencing of pump sites for water systems during hurricanes, to monitor overtime spent out pumping stations out, to help generate hours spent on site for FEMA as well. We have all the data is stored in a SQL database and is produced and reported on. We have dashboards you can see in real time, or go back and produce analytics for one multiple assets over a period of time on your demand. We have output connectors, as we said, for TAC, which is the tactical service that many of our public safety and even Chief Isaac can even speak to a little bit. He's looking at using. And then computer-aided dispatch, we interface with different Esri interfaces and also Trimble, Unity, and CityWorks. We deploy security hardened systems. We're approved with the Department of Energy, the U.S. Air Force, the U.S. Army. We do a lot of on-prem secure systems that, in addition to our other deployments, because they still require it and want it that way. So our deployments can be done in Compass Track Enterprise is an on-prem. It can be done in a hybrid open solution where we can access mapping data from ArcGIS Online or other mapping sources or mapping services, or it can be totally locked down in a case of the Department of Energy where they do not want any outside influence, and we provide the mapping data internal along with location of radios along the site to provide security for these high profile locations. Compass Works is our cloud-based solution. A lot of state and local government now is moving to cloud-based on areas that are not quite as secure. And then Compass Respond, which we'll talk about briefly, is our tactical system, which can be deployed anywhere with radios when wireless connectivity is necessarily not consistent or not available, or after a disaster when wireless may not be available. You can bring the system with you and stand up a system and with the mapping data on an Esri-based environment and track and monitor your response and recovery after the incident. So this has been used specifically, and Chief Isaac has a system he uses. We have systems with the Mexican military. We have them in other parts of the country here as well. And we are doing more and more Starlink backhaul from these systems because there may not be a cellular backhaul. So they bring the system with a Motorola or BK master radio hooked to them, hand radios out to the other users that will be coming in to maybe fight a fire, do search and rescue. And then they can monitor and cover, do geofences, do breadcrumbs, make sure they cover the area that is of interest in this situation. So I want to leave more time for a more recent news. And Chief Jimmy Isaac has been a longtime client of CompassCom in Boone, North Carolina. He's a thought leader in how to use this technology. He's dealing with the hill country of Western North Carolina with the university in the town, with mountain bike parks, tourists, all kinds of different things he deals with every day. And he uses Esri and CompassCom technology. And I thought it would be great if he would share with us his lessons learned and what most recently happened with the events of Helene. So with that being said, Jimmy, take it away. And we're looking forward to hear what you have to say about what you've been through.
Actually, while Chief Isaacs is coming on stage, we'd love to find out what kind of big disasters you've been involved in. We've just popped up a poll on the screen. Let's hear what you guys have dealt with.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. I think the event we just went through is a prime example of what can go wrong, did go wrong. And I want to talk about some of the things that we encountered and how we worked through those solutions, how some of our pre-planning and preparatory work had paid dividends, and how we're going to continue to work through this. A little quick background on the event. We lost power early on the 27th. Generator service at the stations and town facilities, for the biggest part, took over. But we lost internet service, not just to the town, but we lost internet service to the dispatch center to county, which had diverse routes. Both routes failed. Our internet backhaul from the cell service was severely degraded. We lost about 70% of the cell sites in the county. So much of our normal operations that we have become dependent on were dependent on internet service, either mobile broadband or internet service back to our servers. We ran into issues where we have become extremely dependent on travel directions. We went back to the Excel spreadsheets we have that have street names and travel directions that we keep on the apparatus, that we were able to access that. We also keep standalone versions of all of our GIS data. We keep a version of ArcMap with MXDs on each of the apparatus that gives us mapping data even in a disconnected environment. I'm trying to look through my spreadsheet or my notes I've got because there was so many things that did not go the way we hoped would, that it's a lot to look through, and that's one reason I didn't use slides, because it really is a lot that we have to think through. Our GIS department, we run an enterprise environment and host everything internally, which was extremely beneficial from the standpoint when we lost reliable internet service for about 4 days. We were able to get some level of service back up on day 3, but we were only able to bring part of our system back up. And I'm going to get into that a little more in just a second. The things that really went well was once the damage assessment started and we started using Survey 123, it was a simple process of getting somewhere where we had internet service and being able to get those projects loaded on the local device. Then, as long as we could get access back to where we had internet service, we could upload that data to the state. North Carolina did a really good job in keeping that data, making little preliminary changes as we needed them, making adjustments to dashboards to help us get the information we needed. And that really worked well. One of the things that was extremely important and is going to be a lesson learned, a project we've been working on for probably close to a year, was offline data for our field maps, the Esri product. We had part of that up and running, but what we found out was because all of our water and sewer utilities are mapped through our GIS department, we were depending on our field map projects being online projects. And once we lost both internet from our ISP to the town network, and we lost the cellular broadband, we lost the ability to access a lot of that data, which ended up being trips to the office, a lot of lost productivity because of that. Currently, we're looking at everything. We have a online project through our enterprise system. We're going to create an offline project that mirrors that. So as we get into these environments in the future, we can alleviate this portion of the issue. And another thing that we had worked on for about the past 6 or 8 months because of some wildfire issues we had was creating those offline projects. And we had those created, but we had not got to the point of creating those that gave us the utility information that we needed for the water and sewer operation. I want to talk a little bit about our CompassCom products and what we use with CompassCom. We have used AVL data since about 2014 or 15, and we have found that to be very beneficial from the aspect that we needed a mechanism to track our portable radios and response activities on a conventional P25 network. The solution we use is to pass location data back to the server. We have a donor radio that is attached to the server. We collect that, connect that back to the repeater as that data is transmitted with the radios, even through our 5-minute polling interval, or on the push to talk, it collects that data and in turn gives us the ability to display that data. That can be looked at either locally or through a website that we can access. Unfortunately, during the hurricane with loss of internet activity, the only place that data was accessible was through local access at the fire stations or other town facilities. For the biggest part, our internal network and local dark fiber network between facilities stayed operational. So that worked great as long as we had an environment where we could pull somebody away to use that. And we did use that to a large extent once we got past the primary event on the 27th. We started using it more midday, later in the day on the 27th as the event moved on. One of the issues we ran into early on was integrating Starlink into our network as an emergency measure to bring our internet access back online. As we did this, there were some things we were not entirely aware of that we discovered during this process. Starlink only allows one external IP address or a public IP address. And in order to pass that public IP address to the internal network, you have to completely disable the wireless, which was somewhat expected. So in our normal environment, we operate with about 28 IP addresses where we can segregate each activity with its own DNS. And during this process, we had to get real creative and was only able to bring a portion of what we needed back online. And that in turn meant we could not bring our portal server back online and get that piece of the Esri products up and running. So a lot of this is a learning experience to figure out, even though we felt like we had made a lot of positive headway in the past, the CompassCom product, our Esri products, we just need to develop fail-safe methods. We are not as dependent on some of the technology as far as communications network that are so prone to failure. Now, if we historically go back and look at disasters, whether it be wildfire, whether it be hurricanes, whether it be floods, we see a common denominator of all of the systems that fail. We see power failures, we see communication systems failure, we see internet failures. In the town, we lost our entire water system for about 72 hours. That was one of the things that would have been extremely beneficial, was looking at utility data in a live environment instead of having to send people back to the office, or depending on interpretation of what they're looking at on the screen and relaying that information to the people in the field. Like I said earlier, our dispatch center received an astronomical amount of 911 calls. There was some early provisions made to route excess 911 calls to another PSAP outside the affected area. Unfortunately, we lost the ability to get the information back from those calls because of fiber optic network was compromised on our diverse routes back. So I think that as we look at this, we see that technology is such a benefit to us, but we also have to learn not to become complacent and have backup plans for this. We keep caches of portable radios that are pre-configured to use either the Compass Response system or the Compass Track server. We were able to deploy those as resources began to arrive later in the day on the 27th. We were able to deploy the radios and stuff to those assets to help with that. After the fact or a recovery standpoint, we started getting a good bit of post-storm satellite data that we could utilize to look for damage, especially landslide areas, look for stream beds that had changed. And a lot of those things were good pieces of intelligence to look at how this storm had changed the landscape and what it's going to look like in the future as we move forward. In a brief overview, that basically covers most of what we encountered without getting real down in the weeds with it. A lot of different pieces and parts that really took days to get back operational to where we could operate normally. It took the town's internet was 8 days before it was back operational to where we could get some things back to normal. Lessons learned is going to be making sure that we try to look at where our lines of internet come from. Currently, we're in the process of looking at diversifying where we get our internet from. Currently, our internet comes from the south, out of the Asheville area. Asheville was hit extremely hard, and that was part of the time lag in getting internet back up. Looking to get another provider that either comes in from the north or the west, and trying to figure some redundancy in what we currently have. And that's all I've got for this.
Right. Hey everyone, my name is Eric Frierson and I'm with Samsara. I'm a field engineering manager, which means I typically head out in the field and work with different types of state and local organizations with a lot of emergency management experience under my belt as well. What I'm going to talk a little bit about today are some of the technologies that we can bring to the table to help connect real-time assets to your emergency operations. And I appreciate the story that Chief Isaac shared and some of our other partners here on this call. So I felt I should introduce our company a little bit and what our goals are and what we do, and then kind of dive into how we fit into an ecosystem of technologies that gets you the information you need to get the job done. Our goal is to help improve the safety, efficiency, and sustainability of the operations that power our global economy. And that very much includes emergency management, disaster recovery, the folks that keeps our communities livable. As a company, we've been around for about 9 years, but have exceeded goodness, it's about 13 trillion data points that we process annually, connected to tens of thousands of customers around the globe who trust us to make sure that their data stays in the cloud and in real time. I think the real time aspect is important for gaining visibility into what's happening out there in the field and being able to pipe that into Esri solutions where you're managing things through in the operation centers that Jeremiah shared earlier. We want to make sure that you have visibility into things that matter when emergencies are happening. Just to give you a customer story here of an example, city of Syracuse. If you know Syracuse, it's the snowiest place in the United States. They, as you might imagine, get calls from citizens like you would during any type of emergency, trying to figure out where their service is. Are they, what's happening? And that having to pick up the phone call not only slows down response because you're driving attention away from actually doing the job, but citizens feel like there's no transparency if they have to make these phone calls, right? So by deploying Samsara's solutions out onto these snowplows, the things that we can do in terms of tracking when that plow has gone down a street and had that spreader enabled and knowing how much salt, sand, pre-wet liquid that we're spreading in these snow emergencies, for example, and then being able to pipe that data into, for example, an Esri solution where you can publish a map on their website. The results are here. We had a 30% decrease in citizen calls in that first winter after deploying Samsara, which helped that city and the department focus in on keeping those roads clear and built transparency with the citizens who could simply pop onto the website, see if their streets had been plowed, and know when help was coming. So let's talk a little bit about how Samsara helps you gather that type of information, right? We've got several hardware products that range from your kind of typical AVL type of solution with our vehicle gateways. These are plugged into every single vehicle that you might have out there that can track the operations of that vehicle. So any type of power takeoff functions, plow functionality, for snow events, we can plug right into a spreader controller, so you know exactly when you're blasting or when you're spreading. Helps with a lot of different use cases, like making sure operators of these critical assets know how to use them and are trained to do them effectively, because you can monitor the usage of those things. But we're also able to track a whole other variety of things, right? We've got something called our asset gateway, which can track heavy yellow iron, those things that are going in to clean up after a disaster has happened. Knowing how much time you've used on those things for utilization reporting, being able to track usage against different disasters will be important for that FEMA reporting we talked about earlier. We've got the capability to specify that I'm, as a worker, I'm starting a deployment. If I'm leaving my state to go assist in North Carolina, for example, from the state of Texas, I can specify I'm heading out to help with Helene. And from that point on in our system, you're generating data in terms of the odometer values of your vehicles, the time you spent out there, and the operations of those vehicles are all tracked against that disaster declaration. But we've also got a few other things that we use to track just knowing where things are. So, for example, our asset tag, which is the item in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, this is a little industrial, operationally scaled AirTag. So if you're familiar with what AirTags do from Apple's products, right, you can attach those to anything and you'll be able to track where they're at. They're not powered by cellular. They're powered by seeing other Apple products around them. These devices work the same way. They see a Samsara piece of equipment. Doesn't even have to be your own. They see a Samsara piece of equipment out in the wild. They'll be able to let you know where they're at. Very lightweight, very long lasting, very ruggedized. We actually had a concrete production customer encase one of these in a pillar of concrete and then pressure test that concrete. And this little device can survive all kinds of things. We've got some IP ratings we can share as well to make sure that during these heavy weather events, during floods, during high or extreme temperatures, our devices will continue to function as expected, so you can rely on them. I mentioned that we track a variety of different things. So yeah, I think most people, whenever you think AVL systems, you think about where are my vehicles, but we can also pull diagnostics, making sure you're ready when the when the disaster strikes. We want to make sure you're aware of fault codes that might be on those vehicles that could take them out of service at a critical moment. Our platform is built to help you stay ahead of those issues. In addition to that live GPS. But we also know a lot about the drivers of these vehicles too, knowing who's driving, how much time they've been out on the road, who's fatigued. We can get on equipment, on high value assets. I think of things like the jaws of life or something like that, where if a disaster happens and there's a wreck and you need to know where that piece of equipment is, being able to spot it and easily route it to your location to get the job done. That's what our asset tag is there for. But you may have seen the cameras on the last slide too. We can also track the safety and readiness of your drivers as well. And I've got a specific example a little bit later. In addition to workflows and real-time alerting that might draw your attention to a vehicle that's about to go out of service, right? You'd hate to dispatch someone out to a location and they've got a vehicle that's about to break down. So we can help you with those types of things. I'm glad we've been talking about connectivity lately. Our devices can connect to local Wi-Fi networks. So if you do have a satellite-oriented connection in your vehicles that provides local networking within each vehicle, our devices can use that to make sure you keep visibility even when the cellular networks go down. But in the event that a cellular network goes down, we do have a pretty unique dual SIM that comes standard on all of our gateways. This is where we rely on AT&T to start, but if we don't get good signal from AT&T, we will automatically switch over to a multi-network SIM card that can connect to T-Mobile, Verizon, a variety of widely available networks. But where I think we really stand out is that we don't just have the big ones like Verizon, AT&T, Mobile. We recognize there are areas of this country where there's not great connectivity from even the three big players out there. So we also use that SIM card to connect to regional networks. So what I'm showing you on the screen here, that lit up area, that's our coverage in the Appalachian Mountains, and that's without Verizon, AT&T, and Mobile. This is because we've got a partnership with one of the regional carriers there, Appalachian Wireless, to make sure that our products stay connected, even in the most remote areas where you need a specialized network to stay connected. So Appalachian Wireless is not the only one, and typically we are able to stay with great connectivity through our dual SIM card configuration. But proof is in the pudding. We love it when we have customers who have remote service areas that test us out. My favorite one recently was the Road to Hana in Hawaii, we had a customer there say we can't get cellular on the road to Hana. It's this ridge road that kind of goes to the eastern side of the island, and they tested it out, and we could follow that GPS signal around every single curve of that road that typically you lose connectivity for. And then finally, I wanted to talk about our connectivity with AT&T's FirstNet. As many of you on this call already know, FirstNet is the ability to preempt other traffic on the network. It's available to organizations like yours, fire, law enforcement, EMS, and we're the only AVL solution, and that cascades into our cameras and our other assets that connect through our vehicle gateway. We can connect to that FirstNet network, that if there is congestion on the network due to an emergency or an SEC football game or something like that, your devices will still stay preempted on the network, so you can remain connected even in those environments. So I want to pull this back and talk about how we connect with some of the other partners on this call, Esri in particular. Esri's got some great solutions out there with dashboards that address real use cases, right? And when you combine real-time data that we can provide with the variety of maps, of layers, of things that you can get through their living atlas, through a system like Velocity or Geo Event Server, if you don't have those, that's something to consider, because Samsara is something you can turn on in those systems, create an analytic, and very easily drive some really interesting insights that combine your knowledge of real-time location, health, safety events with other data available through Esri, like weather or traffic conditions, to get some really impactful insights at a glance through the visualizations that can be driven there. So, for example, you can get an alert and notification when a driver is entering an active fire area. That's possible because Samsara is providing that location data, combining it with known fire risks in the area to drive that type of insight. Route that critical equipment to emergency, avoiding traffic. Plot those damage assessments on the map. I think we saw an example of that as well. Samsara does have its own form solution that I'll show you in a moment too, but kind of expanding beyond that, our dash cameras have been critical for emergency responders. You'll see this kind of stream of video down here at the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, and let me loop that one more time. You can get real visibility into what road conditions look like through our dash cameras. So if you ever need to pop on and see what's going on out in the roads, are the roads safe to be on? You can pull video like this. You can live stream, so it's like you've got eyes through the camera, or you can feed these things into an Esri map that's published to the web, where citizens can take a look at what road conditions are like out there on the road. So again, Samsara is not just an AVL system. We've got so much different ways to sense and collect data that through something like Velocity, we can pipe it into your Esri solutions that you're working with too. On the right, you see some of our AI detections. We can do important things like drowsiness detection. The workers that you've got out there on the roads are tired, they're working hard, and we don't want them to get in an accident in the line of duty. So these types of things can play an alert in the cab whenever we notice somebody looking a little tired. That might encourage them to either call for help or wake up a little bit so they don't cause any any accidents, and protect themselves as well. So our AI that's built into our cameras can detect all kinds of things, from the things that create risk for your organizations, like lack of a seat belt, or handling being inattentive, looking at something in the cab as opposed to the road. These are types of things we can help you keep eyes on to reduce the amount of risk and keep your drivers safe and returning home at the end of an event. We've actually got some specific things in our safety inbox. This is the part where our AI camera is proactively notifying administrators or supervisors that we may have an issue, to filter out things that happen as just part of emergency response. So, for example, police organizations, law enforcement organizations, If they've got their lights and sirens on and they're speeding, that's not something we need to draw the attention of a safety officer to, right? That's how this business works. So we can automatically dismiss and filter things with understanding that the lights were on, the alarms were blaring. We have that type of visibility through our system. So you can get better insights to where your actual risk is versus where it's just part of the job. This is the very final thing I'll show. I'm going to go into a bit of a live demo here. What I've got in the middle of my screen is the Samsara Worker app. Here we've got a digital forms product similar to Forms or Survey 123, but there's a little nuance here that I want to share. And what I'm about to show you here in terms of filling out a form, this can be piped into Esri in the same way that the Survey 123 is. And I want to show you this because it's an advantage that we provide using our app. So you might imagine this thing right here being a tablet that's in a vehicle or a phone in the hands of someone, first responder out there. If I go to a public assistance damage assessment form here, I can provide the declaration number, all of the information that you might see on a typical survey-like application. But where we distinguish ourselves here is I can actually upload photos of the damage here. And it's not just uploading the photos. Let me show you why this is different from what you may have seen before. I'm going to add just a couple of more. Add photos. So what I've taken here is, that windshield experience. We're taking photos of damage around. And if I tap on extract and autofill, what it's going to do is take those photos and use AI to help shortcut this form fill. I can see the type of facility, what type of damage, debris, non-structural damage, structural damage, pre-populated, what the probable cause of that damage was, can get pre-populated as well. And now I've kind of gotten a head start just by going around and taking pictures of things. Perhaps we noticed something that missed a visual inspection that our AI was able to pick up here. And what we're looking to do is to make that experience of being out there recording in damage, using this AI to make that process faster and more complete. If you've got some receipts that you need to scan due to some emergency repairs that happened, I can even take a receipt from a service agency, extract an autofill, and it's going to use even handwritten receipts to extract and pre-populate this form in terms of total cost, the types of repair and services rendered. And this is extremely flexible. You can ask the AI to pull out certain things and fill out the form in a specific way. So wanted to share some of the things we're doing with our forms here and wrap it up by coming back to our slideshow, just demonstrating how these things, when working together, give you the total view that you're looking for, the real-time data out of a system like Samsara, and then plugged into your operational systems that you might be using in something like Esri. So here's the Snow Operations Center from Syracuse, and you can see just by hovering over their publicly available map. Let's say I live here on Beatty Street. I can just click on my street and see that it was serviced just this morning at 7:24 a.m. So this is the type of power that you can get by connecting the real-time data sources through Velocity into the Esri solutions we mentioned earlier. Samsara's got an open API. If I've taken a look at how Velocity works. It's drag and drop. It's very simple to plug in all the variety of Samsara data points that we have into your operational center. So really, it's a matter of identifying the data that you want to track with us through real time and getting it onto the maps in an intuitive way through Velocity and their analytics here. So I'd like to invite the rest of the presenters back onto the stage for our Q&A.
Great presentation, Eric. Thanks for that. And of course, Brent, you as well. We do have a few questions to run through from the audience and general discussion issues, but Chief Isaacson, we'll start with you. If we can get everybody back in the room. There we go. So first of all, sir, thanks for spending some time with us today. I know you're literally still digging out, right? Still in the recovery phase there, but you talked about a number of challenges you faced, particularly the first few operational periods. So what would be your first priority for a contingency plan? I mean, we talk about connectivity, we talk about imagery. and then, you know, having some of those processes available early on. So as you complete your recovery, what's the first thing you're going to work on to improve for your response around technology, GIS, or that kind of accountability?
I think the first thing we're going to work on and have already completed is increasing our Starlink capacity. We've got have purchased several Starlinks. I think that's going to be a big start to getting that redundancy as far as connectivity. I think the second thing we're currently working on is diversifying our ISP routes, coming into two different facilities and diversifying that where we hopefully don't lose both of those. Looking historically at what this event did, where our route that goes back to where those fibers come into the town at is only about less than a half a mile from Fire Station 2. Our primary ISP comes in at City Hall, which is about 4 miles away. So we know that the route coming in did not fail at that location. So we're going to come from there to Fire Station 2 with a route from a second ISP to provide that redundancy in the system. We have looked at some other pieces to try to provide some more redundancy. We're currently looking and talking with the potential of being able to pass location data on the statewide trunk radio system, which there is some discussions with that. So that way that'll give us another redundancy of being able to utilize that system for AVL data in addition to our owned P25 system, conventional.
Yeah, excellent, excellent. Yeah, that satellite connectivity, you know, that sat to phone kind of capabilities, you'll change the way we track firefighters in the field and really provide some, you know, personnel accountability where previously we just didn't have access. So yeah, that's certainly a great focus point.
Yeah, our GIS tech has done a great job with what he's built out to this point. We just have identified some offline data models that we need to maintain and have those. So when we do have these failures, we're not caught without what we need.
Excellent. Yeah, and certainly everybody on this call will be glad to help. You know, if you run into issues or obstacles, and I know that Eric and Brant both would be glad to, and obviously Brant's already demonstrated that. So, but certainly interested to hear how that turns out, you know, what the story is. So please, you know, maintain, maybe we do another one of these in about a year and see what it looks like, right? So speaking of Brant, next question. Brant, you had a question earlier about what SQL database you're using. I think I don't recall what part of the conversation we were in when that question popped up, but I got a follow-up to that too. But if you want to answer that question first. And you're still on mute, Brent. If I can unmute him.
Brant, you're muted.
Yeah, we support the Microsoft stack of database, and we work with the standard SQL database in 2017, 2019, and we're constantly upgrading with them. We're a hybrid-based software solution, which means our solution we use in the cloud at Azure, and the secure portion of Azure is the same code set we typically use on-prem, that's hardened on-prem as well. And then our Compass Respond is actually uses as a runtime out in the field is a different configuration. But opposed to having to maintain multiple different code sets, we have standardized on the SQL 2017, 2019. And as Microsoft upgrades servers and upgrades things on-prem, we have to go and support that and get everybody up to speed. But just like Esri, we support on-prem and we support in the cloud. And because there's a need for both, there's just not one solution that meets the need.
Yeah, we had a discussion actually today with some law enforcement officials about that hybrid approach and be able to have, you know, both that enterprise and cloud or SaaS based kind of approach to it. Just gives you flexibility, right, and how to share data and implement all these applications. So looking at the resource tracking specifically, Brant, I mean, do you see agencies using that kind of data, or could they use that kind of data to do, say, after action reports and understand where resources were from a historical view and how they were dispatched or responded, or those kind of tracking capabilities?
Absolutely, and I think Eric has this capability as well. But we store the data, all the data comes in, whether it's snow materials that are being put down, whether it's status of radios. When again, we're doing a little bit different thing with the P25 and also the land mobile radio systems combined with broadband cellular systems into one common operational picture. But when that officer pushes that emergency button, that gets recorded into the system so they can go back and do replays at any time. They can do reporting on how many alerts we had over a period of time and when those alerts occurred. When the alerts occurred, they send emails out to the person that is the manager or the commander of those events. So to answer your question, yeah, we, in addition to the real time, it's more, and I think Eric touched on this, it's more in vehicles on a map. It's more than assets on a map. It's about the data. And it's about how do you keep that data. And I think what's really important for disaster management is training. And I think, Jimmy, maybe you can speak to your training is probably going to change a lot based on what happened. But to be able to do training events, tracking individual radios, vehicles, high value assets, such as light bars, such as pumps. I can tell you Illinois DOT, we track the pumps they use, centrifugal pumps they use and loan out to the communities on the Mississippi River for flooding and monitor the status of the service and when it was last done. They put those assets out there and give them to them, and the people don't care. They just use them up, and then they'll fail. So we monitor that kind of thing as well. It's in a database, it generates alerts, it reports on alerts and as well. So, but the training side of this, I think, is really important to be able to do coordination ahead of time. And as our friends in the special forces say, the plan is great until the first shot is fired. And you need a plan. You need to be able to act on that plan, but you need to be flexible, right, Jimmy, to have redundancies and other options to deal with it. And you can address that if you'd like.
Yeah, well, one of the things, and kind of hitting on what you talked about a little bit, was we went back after the fact and looked at pulled a track, historical track of where individual radios were to kind of look at time frame people spent in each location. We did on the 27th, somewhere in the vicinity of 200 rescues on the 27th. And with dispatch being somewhat compromised and the sheer volume of calls that came in, a lot of that being able to track where people were came down to going back and pulling historical data from CompassCom product. One of the things I've talked with one of the software engineers with CompassCom, Brandon, about was being able to have an export button where we could export a certain time frame out and pull that out into a shapefile or a geodatabase that we could depict that, or simply email that to people where each of the points, we could be able to click on those points and look at the data associated with those points. So some of these things that we had talked about after this event, I think they really show a lot of merit, and I think they can really make our life easier in trying to look at it after the fact.
Excellent point, Chief. Along the lines of those resource management or resource deployment questions, I'm going to throw it to Eric. And Sam, Sarah, could be used, or what are your thoughts about identifying the appropriate resources for pre-deployment and pre-planning issues, and then actually the deployment of? I mean, how do you see customers leveraging that location data and those capabilities like you were describing earlier during actual events?
Yeah, sure. So that readiness is extremely important. We do a lot of things in terms of visibility into things like generators that will need to be spun up at critical moments. We want to make sure that those things are fueled, the engines are healthy, and we want proactive notifications when things like that happen. So, for example, we see a lot of organizations that send technicians to drive around to every single generator in an area. That could eat up weeks of a person's time just going out to these remote areas to make sure the generators are operational and ready for a disaster. Whereas with our tracking systems and being able to detect the health of the engine in that generator, the fuel levels, making sure they're ready always, and letting you know proactively if something looks like there's a problem. Those are the types of tools we typically see with organizations who want to stay ready. Um, I also want to appreciate Brant's call out about training. We've also seen this out in the field as well, where you've got tons of these resources, but unfamiliarity with how to be efficient with them. We also do offer a whole training platform too that can be done just as efficiently, where you push training courses out to your workers so they understand how to make use of the tools that are out there and stay I think there are a lot of different training solutions out there, but we can keep track of, do the right people have the right training to make the best use of the equipment and tools and resources at their disposal. And we didn't get a chance to talk about that, but I wanted to bring that up as part of the Samsara operational platform too. But yeah, our GPS is highly accurate. We collect it multiple times a second to create smooth pathways and send that data up into our cloud multiple times a second. And I know that Esri's Velocity product can also pull us extremely frequently, updating its location every 5 seconds, so you know where it's at and you can make the best decisions in terms of deployment through one of your solution centers, using information from us about, all right, does that asset have enough fuel to get to the location they need to get to, and then merging that with like weather and traffic data that you might provide through your Living Atlas.
Excellent. Yeah, great description of that. So yeah, we're definitely seeing kind of a change in the industry, certainly an increase in the capabilities, particularly when, like you're talking about, the refresh rates and having that updated data near real time. I can tell you, just getting the damage assessment data back, not in 10 or 12 hours, but in 10 or 12 seconds, as teams move through the operational area, has just been incredible. And I'm going to throw it to Jeremiah. And Jared, give us some examples of how working with these kind of solutions, this kind of damage assessment workflow, provides efficiencies, in getting services to those that need it.
Yeah, so we talked about really kind of how we hitched to the FEMA process and doing the whole individual assistance preliminary damage assessment. You're basically going out and you're doing the whole assessment on the ground, and just getting a dashboard back gets you kind of an idea on where things are bad, and you can start to send those resources. But another trend that we definitely have seen, and we're going to see a lot more of this, is we have pre-trained AI models that will basically do a before and after look at imagery. So you have as is imagery, and then imagery flyovers happen very quickly now with drones. And those AI models can take that comparison and spit out real quickly where are the damage assessments. So for these things that, like such as Ian or the fires in Hawaii last year, where things are really bad, the imagery detects that pretty quickly, and not only detects it just to say it's damage, but we can look at things like compare it versus what type of structure it was and so forth. So the process I showed is very relevant and going to be relevant for a long time, but like for especially some of these massive disasters, the AI models combined with imagery is going to be a growing trend for sure. And we're going to have more tools to help with that and speed up the process of helping acquire imagery from our partners and so forth too.
Yeah, the AI component, within the app. I mean, what Eric was demonstrating on autofills and the analysis of the imagery in the app, I mean, that's just incredible. And you'll see more and more of that available, as we continue to improve those capabilities.
Interesting to see some customers send our imagery data from our cameras into Esri systems, where you can apply some of that AI and big data learning that you've got. That'd be super cool to see that every 2-minute still that we're gathering start to populate some interesting layers and data on your maps. That'd be pretty
Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be awesome. I mean, and we're there. I mean, it's coming that quick. I mean, very quickly. We do have those polls we ran earlier. Speaking of data, good segue there, Eric. We did want to show the results of those polls as we kind of close out here. I will say, speaking about a couple of points I want to that I've heard the panelists make, is we recently were working with FEMA, the response branch, on some after action meetings, I guess, working with them. But it was two things that came up. One was embrace the technology. So these kind of field mobile applications that are not only collecting data and turning your firefighters and police officers and emergency managers into human sensors, but actually having the ability to track them in near real time, so it provides a safer working environment. And much like Brent, Eric, and Chief have talked about, I can see where they've been and I can see where they need to go, right, and keep them out of trouble if I can understand where their location is. So that's, embrace the technology and these kind of technologies in the field. And the other thing that was brought up was training, because we had a lot of, during the two hurricanes occurring basically at the same time, is just-in-time training for getting boots on the ground and out to do search and rescue, damage assessment, and recovery operations, so things like that. So certainly want to thank again the panel and then our attendees, which you saw, majority of which were primarily from local government, which is great. That's where, all emergency management's local, right? So it always starts there. So please engage in these technologies and reach out if you need any assistance with that. And then we can see the disaster experience, see a lot of flooding, hurricane, a lot of water, wind related events. So a lot of great experience online as well. So thank you so much for participating. We're going to close out here. Have a good day and be safe.